However, sedum album is doing all sorts of cool stuff. So after that water, it drops its acid down, which means that it's probably moving, it's not doing CAM as strongly, it's moving more towards C3. But then that next night, it starts making more acid again. So it has very quick responses to soil moisture. Now adding the carbon dioxide layer on here. And what we're looking at here, each line is an individual plant of sedum tornatum, and the gray shading indicates nighttime. This plant is exhibiting very classic C3. So during the day, here in white, plant is taking up CO2, and at night, it's releasing CO2. Now we have sedum album. And when I was making these graphs, I was just doing them in alphabetical order. And so this was the first graph I made, and I saw this and was like, oh, I screwed something up. This is not right. But it is right. It's just, this plant has clearly not read a plant physiology textbook and doesn't know what it's supposed to be doing. And so what we see here is that it's hardly ever taking in CO2, maybe a little bit here, a little bit here for those plants. There's no clear diurnal pattern, it's kind of spaghetti. And what this suggests to me is that this plant is doing CAM idling. And this is kind of a panic mode for a plant. So the plant's not able to grow during this, but what the plant can do is it can keep its stomata closed, so it's not losing water, but it can recycle its respiratory CO2, and that allows it to get through this drought and then be able to grow later on. All right, and for these set of graphs, what I'm showing you is on the y-axis is the 2007 data, so from that big survey on the roof, and then the x-axis is acid accumulation from this experiment. And so I only have 4 species that overlap between these 2 experiments, but from this graph it does look like there's this inverse relationship. So if a plant is very CAM-like, like these 2, it's going to have lower growth than sedum sexangulaire, that is more on the C3 side of the spectrum. Now, if you look at drought tolerance, the results are a little less clear, primarily because 3 out of 4 of the plants have very high drought tolerance. So to look at this, you really have to have more species and drought stress them to the point of killing some of them. Now looking at plasticity, it's a little, not as clear trends here, but there may be a negative relationship here, and again, kind of the same thing here, it's equivocal. So first off, there's variation in photosynthetic type. Some sedum species exhibit photosynthetic plasticity, and it's not yet clear if photosynthetic plasticity is correlated with performance of plants on a green roof. So now we've looked at both of these questions, and now the challenge is really to take this information and synthesize it and see if we can inform green roof design to improve performance. And that brings us to facilitation. So back in 2007, this is what the plots look like at the end of the summer. You can see that the sedums are all like happy and green, and then we have some corpses of the other plants, dried and brittle. And I was kind of humiliated by this, but Colin looked at this and said, oh, this is very interesting. And he observed that the containers with sedum were much cooler than the ones without sedum. And so we formulated this research question of, can sedum facilitate the growth and survival of neighboring plants on a green roof through reduction of peak soil temperature? And this idea actually has a long history in ecology, dating back to this really elegant experiment from the 1960s. And what Turner and colleagues did here is they looked at saguaro cactus seedling survival and establishment in the Sonoran Desert. And they found that seedlings that happened to end up out in the open, soil was very hot and they tended to die. Whereas if the seedlings happened to end up under a big shrub like this, the soil was 4 to 9 degrees cooler, and that was enough to allow the plant to survive. And then years later, you end up with something like this, where you have this giant cactus growing out of a shrub. So we're taking this idea, moving it up to a roof. I'm going to show you the results of 2 experiments here. And the first one is a 3-year-long experiment. I looked at 1 sedum species, sedum album, and that's actually one of the very CAM-like ones, so it's presumably not using a lot of water. And I looked at 2 focal species and measured growth and drought tolerance. The second experiment is kind of elaborating on that, so it's looking at 4 sedum species and only 1 focal species, and I'm taking the same measurements but also measuring soil temperature. Here's what the first experiment looked like. 2 focal species are Asclepias verticillata and Augustastra rupestris. You might remember these 2 from the very first experiment. So they did die in the end, but they really put up a good fight. These are some of the strongest ones. That's why we chose those. And I grew both of these either by themselves in this bare substrate or with a carpet of sedum album. And here you can see what Augustastra rupestris looks like by itself And you'll notice that, hopefully you can see that they're different colors, so when you take pictures of them, you can analyze them later on for percent cover, so it works out really well. Here's what it looks like in real life, and you can note here there's an unsampled border row of sedum. This was to prevent edge effect. You know, there's a lot of sun beating down on those outside rows, and all the experimental plants are in this middle section all the way around. And you can see they're quite large. And you can also note Emily here, who's looking at B, and spectators who are looking at Emily looking at B. Common occurrence, like you can't like pick your nose during field work because there's people looking at you. So looking at growth here, we're 2 species. And we'll look first at the Augustache. And we see for 2008 and 2009, plants that were grown alone tended to grow bigger than plants that were grown with sedum. And this suggests competition between the 2 plant species. In 2010, however, both sets of plants are very small. And my explanation for this is that the drought hit a little bit earlier that year, and so I think the plants just weren't able to grow big enough. Asclepias verticillata, we see pretty similar patterns to the Augustache. Now I'm going to show you drought tolerance. And the way I did this was, again, based on these pictures. And this top row of plants are plants with high drought tolerance. So it's before and after drought. You can see like this one and this one. The plant kept most of its leaves, same with this one. These ones on the bottom are plants that lost most of their leaves, which you can tell from here to here, here to here. So here's the drought tolerance. Looking at Augustache first, 2008, 2009, the plants grown with sedum had higher drought tolerance than those grown by themselves. In 2010, it was kind of the same, probably because they were all really small at that point. With Asclepias, the story is a little different. In 2008, there wasn't really any plant loss at all because these plants are very drought tolerant, so we didn't actually see an effect. But in 2009, we did see an effect. 2010, again, plants are kind of too small. As far as survival goes, for most plants, we didn't get to the point where we were killing them, it was just drought stressing them. But with the Augustache, we did see a trend towards higher survival with sedum. With the Asclepias, the plants were so drought tolerant that they all survived regardless. I think this little bump here is one plant that died. So now building on this with experiment 2, I used a different focal species this time. This is in the same genus as that Augustache rupestris, but this one is another variety. And I like this plant because it has this really nice upright growth habit, so it's not going to shade the sedum very much. It's really easy to count the stems to get an estimate of plant growth, and it has a really nice wilt response, so you can look at drought stress pretty fast. You grew it by itself, and then with these 4 species of sedum. Here's what this one looked like. It's actually right next to the other experiment. And again, here's the unsampled border row along the back edge, and all of my experimental plants are in this middle section. Now the first thing is that we saw this really nice temperature difference. So I put little data loggers in the soil, left them in for a month, came back. And what I'm showing you here is days in which the high air temperature was higher than 30 degrees. And all of those species of sedum, all 4 of them cooled the soil as compared to the soil by itself. And interestingly, the magnitude of this is kind of similar to that Turner experiment from 1966. So he found 4 to 9 degrees Celsius, and mine is about 5 to 7. Secondly, we found that sedum reduces growth, and so growth I estimated by the number of stems, which is not an exact measure, but it does give you a pretty good estimate, as you can see in these pictures over here. And now, as far as drought tolerance goes, for this I made up a 3-level health score. A score of 0 is a plant that is presumably dead. It has brown stems, brown crispy leaves. A score of 1 is a plant that has green stems, but most of its leaves are kind of wilty. And a score of 2 is a plant that's very healthy, green stems, green leaves. And now here we can see that the sedum, the plants with sedum had higher drought tolerance than the plants grown alone. So part of this is that the plants with sedum were smaller, which made them better able to survive drought. But when I did an analysis, that wasn't actually a significant factor. And if you look back in this picture, you can see that these are 3 different plants, and they're kind of the same size. And even this one with the soil by itself is dead, whereas this one with the sedum here is alive. For survival, it really depends on the frequency and timing. So after this first drought, when most plants were pretty big, we generally saw a little bit lower survival with the bear, but again, there's Sample sizes are too small to do stats on this. After repeated droughts, we saw low survival for everybody, and I think it's a little bit lower for the sedum ones because these plants after the first drought kept most of their leaves, so they were hit harder by the second one and the third one. Conclusions for this part is that sedum acts as a competitor during wet periods and as a facilitator during dry periods. For experiment 2, all 4 species of sedum cooled the soil, and all 4 of them reduced the maximum growth, but increased drought tolerance of its neighboring plant. And after repeated droughts, all treatments had high mortality. So now conclusions for the whole shebang. So for our survey, sedum lived, everything else died. For the native plants are popular for green roofs, but in general their performance is not very good. For CAMC3, we found that sedum species do exhibit photosynthetic plasticity, but as of this moment, it's unclear whether or not that correlates with success on a green roof. People have to do more experiments to look at that. And for facilitation, we found that sedum cools the soil, it competes during wet periods and facilitates during dry periods. Now, what's up next? I have 2 main avenues of research that I'm going to be working on this summer. This first is looking at green roof plant performance. And although we have a lot of green roofs planted in North America, so we have 100 with natives, probably 1,000 just in general, we don't have a lot of quantitative data on what plants work and what plants don't in different regions of the continent. And the main reason for that is that the people that design and build these roofs are not academics who are going to have replicates and perform experiments and publish papers. But the nice thing we can do is make a database, and so that way people, citizen scientists if you will, can enter in their findings, and then we can compile it all, which would be useful for published paper in the scientific community, and also just open access for people that are designing and building green roofs in their area. So this is kind of a rough cut. I made this a couple months ago and then haven't done anything with it. So this summer I'm going to work on it some more. The idea is that people go in, they enter in some details about their roof, as much as they know about the growing media. Irrigation is really important. And then once they do that once, then they can enter in all the plants they have. And I try to keep this as simple as possible and just talk about, was survival low or high? If the plant died, why do you think it died? Just to get some general information there. Right now the output looks like this. It's a Google Docs spreadsheet. So it's good for scientists. You can pull out all the data, but it's not super user-friendly. So I'm really hoping to find a web designer this summer who I can collaborate with and kind of make this a more workable database for everyone to use. Now the second part, green roofs for pollinators. This is something that's been in the back of my head for years, but I haven't had time to work on. And just to give you a little idea of the potential here, these are just these are some of the insects I found on the green roof in 2008. This was not a comprehensive survey. This is basically, as I'm doing other work, if I saw an insect I didn't know, I would take a picture and go identify it later. So a lot of potential here. And the great thing is that my friend Scott McIver, who's now at York University starting his PhD, he's a real go-getter, and so he's been putting together this big continent-wide survey of cavity nesting bees on green roofs. And he's already applied for a lot of grants. His idea basically is he's going to make these nest boxes here, send them out to different green roofs all over the continent, leave them for a growing season, and then they can send them back and he can identify them. So I talked with him on the phone a couple weeks ago, and so I'm going to kind of jump in on that project this summer, which I'm really excited about. And the acknowledgement. The best part. So first off, I'd like to thank my advisor, Dr. Colleen Butler, who changes his facial hair as much as I change my hair color. He's a man of many talents, a soccer player, a slingshotter, a tree identifier. I couldn't ask for a better advisor. He's been so helpful the past 5 years, a very good mentor in terms of the science and also diplomacy, which I very much appreciate. Also my committee members, Dr. Chu, Dr. Elmore, and Dr. Reed, and my external committee member, Dr. Del Trilogy. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Committee meetings are always really nice, and I don't think I cried after a single one, which for the graduate students in the audience, that's rare. So thank you guys. There's a million people at Tufts that really contributed to this project through funding and through support, and so these are just a couple. Joanne, I'd like to thank the director of the library for letting me hang out on your roof. I really appreciate that. Heather Angstrom, Regina Raboyan, who's back here for helping. Tina Wilson, Anja Danielson, all the department staff, and the grounds crew here. So Niels and Anthony, we've probably seen around campus a lot, shoveling snow this winter. And all of my undergrads and high school kids, it was a lot of work, a lot of physical labor, especially in 2007, 2008. These kids were super motivated. In 2008, they made a green roof exercise video. So it was after we've been moving things all day, and they made this video. I was like, oh, calisthenics. So they're really fun. It was a great time. And all of my department friends and colleagues, who just make this a really nice place to live. You can see the people with PhDs, after you get a PhD, you spend a lot of time pondering and looking into the distance. And I'm looking forward to that. This is our office, which is sometimes cold. It's very hot. And to Dr. Kuhlman, who has been very helpful throughout the past 5 years. And he even got me a signed autograph by David Attenborough, which was really cool. He wrote, I know, embarrassing now. He wrote to the BBC and was like, "Dear David Attenborough." So that was really nice. And to all of Will's family, who lives here today, and then some of them will be coming later on this evening. And to the 4 hamsters we've had together. General Gallo is the one who's been immortalized in the department website. There's actually 3 more little-known hamsters. Sawzall is our current one. And to my family, my lovely sisters, Erin and Megan, and my mom, Eileen, and her husband, Barry, and my dad. This is us on a duck boat. My dad's kind of accident-prone, so we took one in the motor stall, so we had to have like life vests and have the Coast Guard pull us in. And finally, I'd like to dedicate this to my grandparents. They're down in Florida. They really wanted to come up. This is the first PhD of the family, so it's a big deal for us. But it just wasn't feasible. It's too hard. And they're very inspiring, and I just wanted to thank them for all the great children they raised and how it's continuing on. So, thank you.
We have time for questions.
Mike.
Do you think some of the problem with the native and the non-native, that whole issue, is a problem of definition, where maybe a native roof a native Massachusetts roof is more similar, say, to a native environment in California or Michigan or someplace else. So that
Yeah.
just saying a native Massachusetts roof is the same as native natural environment is the same.
Yeah, so I'm simplifying it here, and I think a lot of it has to do with the definition. And lost my train of thought. So one of the good things here, so Jeremy Lenholm, who is professor at St. Mary's University, he's been in the green roof field for a while now, but he started pushing this idea of habitat template. So instead of going to your nursery website and clicking on the native button, instead think about, okay, well, where does this plant live in the wild? This is similar habitat to the roof I'm working on. And so that's starting to catch on, but it's kind of slow going. That has a lot to do with the definition and what you think is a native plant versus a non-native. Yes, Amy.
So sometimes like plants just grow out of buildings by themselves. Like there's a tree growing out of Barnum for a while, and they cut it down. And so I'm wondering if I guess survey what is a native plant. Maybe has anybody considered like doing a survey what plants are like grow almost as weeds or pests on buildings, and they might like it there?
Well, that's a great question. And so my outside committee member, she's just written a book called Wild Urban Plants, which is a great book. You should all buy it. And so I don't think he's focused so much on the roofs, but so my opinion on the roof part of it is that there's a lot of plants that can establish. And so when I first started, I was thinking very ecologically and like, oh, I can put the soil out and then just have succession take place and this community will develop. Well, I guess that would happen in maybe 100, 200 years. But for the first couple of years, you get crabgrass, you get just very common weeds, and you also get tree seedlings that establish. And a lot of these trees have really aggressive roots that if you didn't do anything, they could go through your membrane and cause major leaks. But that's something, there's a lot, like, sort of like the hippie side of the green roof world is very much wanting to do that, which can work to a certain extent, but it is a controlled system. It's a garden, it's not wild. Yes, Mitch.
Your absorbent polymer didn't seem to really have much of an effect, and I would imagine it's a lot more expensive than some of the other materials. Can you comment on whether people should be using that, should not be using that?
Yeah, so the rationale behind that is because, in more natural soils, it's the organic because they'll get really compacted. So the polymer would sort of keep its solid form, but would gradually release the water. And so yeah, I found it didn't work. And I really scoured the literature before that, and no one had done it, and so I did the experiment. And after I presented it at the Green Roof Conference, a lot of people came up and were like, yeah, I tried that, didn't work, so we didn't use it. So again, it comes back to that point of that people, we need to communicate more. So I'm trying to talk more about the polymer to people. Yes, Kelly.
Did you look to see if any of your plants survive from one season to the next, or do you have to replant these roofs every year?
No, they're all perennials, so they come back every year.
And did yours?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of them are evergreen too, so if you go out there now, a bunch of the sedums are there. They turn kind of like a brownish red in the winter, so from far away you can't see them, but yeah, they're fine. I thought winter mortality would be a big deal, and it hasn't at all. Yeah. Yes, Amy.
So I guess I didn't realize this was perennial. I thought you like carted those tubs onto the roof every year. So plants need nutrients. So how do you deal with like the fact that the soil there is going to get depleted?
So what I do, I add a time-release fertilizer every year. But these plants, especially the sedums, are plants that grow in like really rocky, low nutrient areas in the wild, and so they don't need very much nutrients.
But I imagine like on great big green roof, you'd eventually have to like truck all the soil off and replace it, right?
I don't think so. No, and there's been greeners in Germany that have been sort of in place for 40, 50 years, and they're pretty much self-maintaining at that point. Yes.
So following on that question, is there anything you know about accumulation of pathogens in the soil over time in these greenhouses?
I don't, but that definitely could be an issue. I know just in terms of, not so much pathogens, but I do get little grubs in the soil sometimes. And I think if you're using a monoculture of sedum, that could be really dangerous, because if you get one little outbreak of these grubs, it could just sort of destroy everything. But the soil's kind of a black box at this point, and it's just because there's not, the leaders so far have been landscape architects and architects, and ecologists are kind of slow to come. So now we have plant ecologists, and probably the next wave will be soil people and stuff like that. Maybe Ian.
Well, if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank Colleen once again for a really nice talk. Committee members, we're going to meet up in about 10-15 minutes in 114 next door. What we're going to do, if the weather is reasonable, we're going to walk and take a look out onto the green roof as a way of getting some fresh air and some exercise, and then we'll come back for our